um, to tryScrum's webinar series number 15, powered by tryScrum in partnership with Agile Leadership Studio. Today's topic is a pretty interesting topic, I should say. We would have all heard about in our school days in physics about the poles in magnetic theories, like poles repel and unlike poles attract. A similar concept. The topic is next generation leadership, integrating polarities, presented by Venkatesh. Welcome, Venkat. Before I officially hand it over to Venkat, I would like to refresh on the logistic stuff. All your microphones would be muted, and you can post your questions in the Q&A window, not in the chat. You would see something called Q&A posted there. We'll accommodate as many questions as possible. In case if we could not accommodate, it is not that we are not taking your questions, it is we are respecting the time boxes. That's on the logistics part. And about us, who are we? We are tryScrum, and we are a management consulting firm. We offer courses in different fields, be it Scrum Mastery and Agile coaching. We are a PTA network member of Scrum.org, and we are an ICAGL authorized member as well. We run classes from IM 3.0, and we are also a Scrum Alliance member. We offer CAL educator programs from Scrum Alliance. That's about us. About our studios, we run 3 studios, Scrum Master Studio for people, Product Owner Studio for product, and Agile Leadership Studio for the leadership. That's about the studios. This studio specifically, we are running in partnership with Agile Leadership Studio. And about our speaker, most of you know Venkatesh Rajamani. He is a CEC, CTC, and a PST. One of probably in the world, 2 in the world to have to hold these credentials together. And here is his profile to have a look. And welcome, Venkat. I hand it over to you to take over from here.
Thanks, Arun. I think you updated my old profile. I'm no more an SPC now. My license is expired.
Okay.
So if they scale that I see this, probably they may screw me. All right. So thank you very much. I think it is always been a pleasure to talk in the own studio. Even though you run a lot of studios, you will feel that nervousness and pressure when you speak on your own studio because of 2 reasons. One is you set the bar high by inviting a lot of good speakers, and also definitely people coming to tryScrum Studio, at least they have some little bit of an expectation. This is not going to be a jargonish webinar, at least few takeaways I can take and use at my work. That is one of the main objectives that we are trying to do here. So I'm not sure about how much I can take or how much I can accommodate. I'll try my best to cut short this presentation in about 40 minutes because it's not a content that can be digested in 40-45 minutes, to be very frank. And this is something very intense. I would recommend, there are a lot of references available on the PPT. Those that are interested in referring or gaining more insights around the topic, please do refer those stuff. I'm going to talk about integrating polarities. And before I get onto the topic, I wanted to ask a quick question to the audience, maybe. My bad. So, okay. So let me see. So I don't know if I'm sharing the right screen. Just give me a minute. Okay, so if audience could help me, can you please take your mobile phones out and go to menti.com and use the code that's there on the screen and tell me what is coming on your mind when you hear the term leader. The immediate one term that is coming on your mind when you see the term leader. So I'll try to time box this, maybe about a minute. I just started a countdown now. You will have approximately 60 seconds to answer this. In spirit of time, we will just move on after 60 seconds, but whoever is trying to put some responses, it should be available on the screen right away. If you're new to Menti, just take your mobile, go to menti.com. It will ask you a code. Just supply the code that you see on the screen. Then you should be able to see the question that I have posted here, and you should be able to respond from your mobile. Just 8 seconds. Let's see if you get some good responses. Okay, unfortunately the countdown is stopped. I don't want to spend much of your time in taking into the logistics. You see a little bit of creating path. Yes, influence. It's a couple of words patterns that we saw. Lead by example, and command and control is, yeah, we would not call somebody as, in my view, as a leader when someone is trying to do a command and control. But yes, if we have some experience or had really experienced some people who have been calling themselves as leader, but they do command and control, yes, certainly that's the first word that may be coming onto our mind. But apart from that, if you see the majority, we are talking a little bit of a virtue map here, right? Creating a path, mindfulness, leading by example. If you want to do all of this, it's not going to be an easy job for you. Let's see why. So we talked about what is leadership. I'm going to talk about next generation leadership. Maybe a sort of expectation on what would be the challenges for the leaders in the future with respect to the complexity that we are moving towards, and how as a leader you can integrate polarities to demonstrate some of the abilities or skills that is required to be an effective leader. Some of you said some of the skills in the last slide, right? So let's talk about this. So we are moving in a very fast arena. Like, we are not our usual, right? The world is changing. Maybe I'm not going to talk about the digital transformation, but in general, if you take any aspects of the world is changing, be it in terms of economy, or maybe the rapid urbanizations, or maybe socialization, the way that we communicate, the way we pass information with respect to technology, with respect to people, and with respect to the requirements that we have been facing, right? There is one heavy pressure always. Somebody will have to lead the world. When I say lead the world, in terms of be it a professional life or be it a personal life, somebody will have to lead it, right? When it comes to personal life, we may probably lead. I will talk about that in one of the quadrants that we talk about in the Wilbur model. But how are we going to deal with this fast-paced world? What is changing? So one of the things that is going to change is polarities. When you hear about the polarities, I'm going to introduce polarities in the integral multiparity. I'm going to talk about that. But think about this. We are not talking about only, we are saying the world is complex by considering a lot of factors. Some of the factors are competing values, dualities, dual strategy, dilemmas, contradictions. We have opposite strengths. If someone is trying to tell you something is complex, they mean there are so many things exist. Probably Arun talked about that, the opposite forces. It could be good or bad, we don't know, but always there is a polarity. If you want to understand what is polarity, if something is good, definitely there is something bad, because we all do relative comparison. We cannot say something as good unless we have seen something bad, or probably we may have some comparison to say something is bad. So think about this. You have two kinds of culture. You call it as a dual strategy culture. The culture is bad and the culture is good. And contradictions. We all have contradictions, right? How do we say something is contradicting? When someone is saying in the North Pole and somebody is staying in the South Pole, we say there is a contradiction. And ambidexterity. It's like two parts existing. Sometimes it can be whole, sometimes it cannot be. Opposite strengths, hybridity, testimonials, tensions, dilemmas, dichotomies. So these are the polarities that is existing. So somebody used to say theory X and Y. What are we going to do with these polarities? So let's take an example of an organization, right? An organization may be good in a few aspects and they may not be good in a few aspects. So how do we say an organization is good or bad? It depends on where they are spending most of their times with respect to the polarities they have. So we are going to talk about a leadership model. I wouldn't say a leadership model, it's a leadership framework that is going to help leaders to balance all the aspects of polarities. By talking through the polarities, I'm also going to introduce something called multarity. You don't even find this word in dictionary, I believe. So multarity is more than two. Polarity is two, and multarity is more than two. So as a leader, if one is able to understand the polarities at a workplace, probably as a framework, they may be an effective leader, or they will be able to adapt their style according to the complexity or growing complexity that we have been experiencing. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. So example of a polarity, right? We have been talking about polarity. I introduced polarity in a nutshell, but let's go a little bit deeper into polarity. So you see there are two things here, activity and rest, right? So can we get a few chat responses? What do you think about activity and rest? You do a lot of activity and you do rest. At least one or two chat responses if possible. Yeah, some actions you take, that is your activity, steps. And what do you mean by rest? Yes, doing something, doing nothing. Good. Opposite to each other. Yes, again a polarity, right? You do some activity and you don't do anything, which is exactly a polarity. Now, is it good or bad? We cannot say activity is always good. At the same time, we cannot say rest is always good. Let's try to relate this with an example, even more. How do I go to the next screen? Okay. So you see, if you do an activity, which is good, it is a stimulated muscle condition. Let's take an example, fitness as an example. So the upper side of the activity or the positive side is it's going to stimulate your muscles. It's going to create some strengths. But if you do too much of activity, you get the downside, which is your muscles might be exhausted, probably would be wrecked. You need a recovery. Let's take the right hand side view of rest, right? The top is rejuvenated muscles, rest. Yes, you got to have some rest to recover your muscles after the rigorous activity. But if you don't do activity at all, always you're resting, then you probably get into atrophy or allergic muscles. Your muscles will become very lethargic. You will not be able to do any stimulated activities if your muscles are resting for a longer time. This is polarity. We are going to relate this common example in leadership dimensions as well. I know this content is a little heavy to digest, but still I will try my best to give you some insights around how the leadership can use the same model to stimulate some good positive energies in the organization. Right? Let's try to go view from a two-dimensional aspects now. I'm going to introduce a process called small process for you to be able to understand what I'm talking with respect to polarities. The process is very simple. It's small. The expansion is seeing, mapping, assessing, learning, and leveraging. So if you're able to relate this to the previous slide, you're able to see what is happening with respect to your muscle condition, and you should be able to easily map, am I doing too much of activity now? Yes, if it is so, I got to rest. If I'm taking too much of rest, I got to really map towards, I need to say take some actions, which is I need to gravitate towards doing some activities. And the next step you're seeing is assessing. Assessing is when you're going to assess in which of the quadrants you're spending most of the time. And learning is you got to learn from that. And leveraging is now I got to leverage between activity and rest. I cannot be spending too much of time in activity. I cannot be spending too much of time on the rest quadrant. Probably I need to leverage both of these quadrants. So what I'm going to do is when I introduce the leadership polarities, probably we will try to understand how the small process could be used to map some of the polarities in leadership and how a leader can benefit from those mappings, right? Let me move on and explain little more on how you can do the mapping and assessing. You see, there are a lot of stuff that you can map according to the intensity that you have been doing with respect to the activity and rest. If you see the left-hand side, I'm going to spend a little time on this. Some of the repercussions of doing more activities, some of the repercussions of doing optimal activities is there on the top. But if you see the right hand side, this is where how we are going to assess it. You see almost never to almost always. And if you see the down, almost never to almost always. Again, it's a polarity, right? We are going to use this as a framework or a pattern to try to understand how the polarity thinking works in leadership. So to understand that, we need to introduce you something called integral model. I think most of you would have heard about integral model. This was introduced by Ken Wilber. If you see, there are 4 quadrants that we have, like how we see the activity and rest for the exercise. You can have the 4 quadrants for the leadership. Those are I, it, we, and its. If you see the left-hand side, there's something called interior. That's going to talk about more on the inner side, inner orientation of a leader. And the right-hand side is more of outer orientation of a leader, which is your exterior part. And on the top, it's individual. On the down, it's collective. So on the top, it's going to talk more about individuals. On the down, it's going to talk more about collective. So we are going to use this Wilber model as an integral model to map how polarity thinking can be integrated. So we started off with the topic with integrating polarities, right? So we're going to integrate this Wilber model into polarities and see how a leader can benefit by studying the polarities existing among 4 quadrants and how one can aim towards improvement in one of these areas by assessing, leveraging, and learning. So for more information, you can visit integrallife.com. There is a good bunch of resources available. Let's talk about the people that are existing in the organization system, right? I'm going to categorize them into 3. You can call them as leaders. All the leadership roles will come into this category. And the next level is teams. Let's assume that everybody else is a team, depending on the structures and hierarchy they are placed in. And the last one is organization system. So basically, we are talking about human elements and non-human elements. On the top, you see leaders. The polarities existing among the leaders they are grounded and visionary, planning and execution, directive and participative, self-assured and humble. These are all polarities. If you see these two, these are the 2 extreme dimensions of leaders: logic and emotion. Some people are very logical and some people are very emotional with respect to leadership. Similarly, you can map into teams and organizational system. I'm going to talk 1 or 2. You see, the teams may be focusing on individuals. The teams may also focus on the team. So there is again a polarity. And holding responsible and providing freedom. That's also again a polarity. And when you talk about the organizational system, organization focus and community focus, and external focus and internal focus. So again, you can classify any element in an organization into polarities. And this is an inspiration from, I think, Clark's work. There is a person called Clark's. He has done some research on polarities, and I'm referring this content from some of the content from Clark's work to do the mapping or to assess the overall system and see how a leadership can be improved in that system. Right? Let's move on and see how we are going to introduce polarity thinking over problem thinking. So there are 2 things. Problem thinking is very common, many people would have seen, but in terms of polarity thinking, I've introduced a small step called SMALL, right? Seeing, mapping, assessing and learning, leveraging, and there is one more thing called learning and leveraging. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna do these 5 small step process to understand how a leader can look at the system in the coming slides. And I'm going to also do a quick mapping to help you digest some of the information. I'm very mindful about the time as well. So we're gonna see first the tensions in the system, that is seeing, and mapping is, we are going to co-create a relationship with the organizational system. Let's assume that maybe we will co-create the work environment with the teams. And assessing and learning is how things are going. We got to continuously measure the system, measure the performance of the system to be able to take some learnings out of it. And once we got the learning, we got to finally do leveraging so that we continuously manage the polarity thinking in the system. We will not distract too much from the system so that we can maintain the system and manage the system to perform better. So let's try to apply this small process and see how the four quadrants can be used by the leadership. The whole presentation that I'm going to show you is there in one single PPT, which is this. You see, you saw the Wilbur model. A little bit of tweaking the Wilbur model is available here for your understanding. So in Wilbur, you saw I, it, we, and its. Those are the four quadrants. In human system, we are going to map those four quadrants into four behavior characteristics. So you see the top is internal and external. You see the first left-hand side is your internal and the right-hand side is your external. If you come a little bit down, the downside of the quadrants is collective, which is again an internal, and the right-hand side is external. So let me go with the internal and individual stuff, which is your personal meaning. So everybody will have to have a personal meaning to be able to connect to the system, right? And the right hand side is going to be more of an external. So when I talk about external as an individual, it's a behavior. So you can say personal integrity, walk the talk. So I have a personal meaning, which is something that I'm going to say to somebody, or I have a personal value. How somebody is going to validate those values, or probably may sense whether you are embodying those values, is to see whether you are walking the talk. And if you come little down in the collective side, it's going to be cultural and the shared values. So you got to have an individual values at the top. Is it getting aligned with the cultural values and the shared values in the system, right? If you move little down to the right, you have something called system and process. This is very important because you have the great personal alignment. You have the great individual behavior outside, no matter what. You have a great culture, but if you do not have the right system, everything is going to fall back after some time. So you got to basically have four types of alignments: personal alignment, value alignment, structural alignment, mission alignment. If you see any workshop, literally any workshops in the industry, we'll talk about one of these quadrants. I'm not talking about leadership. Talk about agile coaching workshops, for example. Talk about advanced Scrum Mastery workshops. Talk about any situational leadership workshop. If these four alignments are not there, probably you may face some of the issues in the system. We're going to quickly see what are those issues as well, right? So let's get into a little more deeper into these quadrants in the benefit of time. If you do not have, we are going to, what we have seen in the previous slide is multitarity. Some people say multiarity, which means it's not a polarity anymore. It's multiarity, which is more than two. So we're gonna break this complex system. What do you see is a complex system? If you're not able to digest this information, it is a good evidence that what we are talking here is a complex human system. We are trying to address that complexity by breaking down this complex system into polarities. So let's see how we can break down the system into polarities. So the first system I'm going to break down is the first quadrants, probably the first and second quadrant on the top, personal alignment. You see, I'm taking the whole system and breaking down into polarities, which means I'm going to take only the two sides of the system. Left hand side, you have the personal meaning, and right hand side, you have an individual behavior. So if there is a good alignment on the personal meaning and individual behavior, there is a good personal integrity. So as a leader, why this is important? When you pick a person, when you hire somebody in your companies, you got to really see whether there is a good personal meaning and an individual behavior is embodied by an individual. So that's going to give personal integrity. When there is a personal integrity, you can achieve a greater purpose as a leader, right? Let's try to go into the next dimension. So before that, you see what happens if there is no alignment between personal meaning and individual behavior. So I recall the first example, activity versus rest. Take that example. The top portion is the upper quadrant is all positives, the down you see is all negatives. So the positives are people will be very clear on what they have been doing, and they have a very good alignment on the values, and they are very sure that they can take care of themselves and with respect to their financial needs, mentally, physically, spiritually. And that is going to reflect as an individual behavior on the top quadrant, which is the positive side. But if something is not going to be there, you see the negative side. I'm all talk on no action, which means I'm going to embody, I have this kind of stuff, I'm having this behavior and all that, but you're actually faking the personal meaning. So that is going to get reflected on your individual behavior, which means you take action without clear focus. You may be overwhelmed, but soon you're going to get overwhelmed by the job. And sometimes you maybe get stressed mentally and physically as well, because there is no personal meaning and an individual behavior alignment. So, as a leader, the first step for the next generation leader is to look at the system from two perspectives: personal meaning and individual behavior. So, let's see the second polarity: personal alignment and the little bit of a value alignment. So, I'm going to call this quadrant as personal meaning and culture shared values. If you see the positive side of this, the same stuff that we have seen, but with one example or maybe one difference. I have some personal values that is getting aligned with the system. So what I'm going to probably do is I'm going to collaborate with others for a cause. I'm able to amplify the good behavior in the system. I can also work with others well to deliver results, which is important to us, not as an individual. So there is a good alignment. But if the personal meaning and the cultural or the shared values are not going to get aligned, again, the polarities, if not going to get aligned, you're going to see you might lose connection with the shared values, and your personal well-being is going to suffer because the shared value of the system is not getting aligned with your personal values. So what's going to probably happen is you may be a great individual contributors, but you may not be fit for the team environments. So this is very important for a leader, because if the leaders can understand they are spending more time on the personal meaning or on the cultural or shared values, talk about the small process, they will be able to assess where they wanted to focus their attention on to be able to get the synergy out of the system. So this is a good example of why there should be a shared values between the leaders in the team, or could be two groups that are working together for a common goal. So let me go to the third alignment on this quadrant: personal meaning and system and processes. So this is very interesting. If you see the personal meaning and the system, actually this is one of the quadrants where most of the people struggle, in my view, because you may not know your individual behavior may be going well, but when you embody those behavior in the system or process, let's take an example. You have a great meaning, personal meaning, you have a great individual behavior outside, but still you may struggle in the system because you may say the culture of the system is not good. That's something that we have heard often, people saying the culture of this company is bad, I don't want to continue and all that. So let's see how important this for leaders. If you see the personal meaning of the system and process, there is a weak connection. I'm talking the downsides. There's a weak connection between the delivery of work and personal values. And pausing to reflect or celebrate the important values that guide the work is missing, which means the individual is not able to find a spot in the system where he or she is having a meaning in the system. So probably I might start saying that this is not a place for me and I cannot connect my values or my meaning with the system. And what are the upsides of you aligning these two is the system and process aids the delivery of work. You don't see process as process. You don't see system as system. You see the system and process as integrated polarities in you, which means always you look at the system as yours, your purpose, your common goal, and your aspiration, and you celebrate whatever is happening to the system in terms of Good things that is happening to the system, you may probably start celebrating. Bad thing that is happening to the system, you start reflecting. You might take a pause and start reflecting what is happening to the system. You may not think too much individually on a bipolarity sides. Probably you may get gravitated towards balancing these two polarities. And in the benefit of time, I'm just moving on. If you see the last quadrant, I think last but one, individual behavior and shared values. So we talked about the personal meaning, which is intrinsic, which is internal, you cannot see in the system, but you will be able to see the individual behavior and the shared values in the system. So what's going to happen if that is aligned or if that is not aligned? If an individual behavior and the system, the shared values are going to align in the system, you see a very good connection between the individual and the system. And you will probably collaborate for a cause and create or amplify results. For example, you might not combine the system, you might probably synergize and amplifies whatever happening in the system for a positive cause. But if there is going to be a misalignment between the individual behavior and the system, shared values, you're going to lose the connection and your personal well-being is again going to suffer. That is going to affect your individual behavior. If you see, the positive of individual behavior is going to be the negative of individual behavior now. You might probably start thinking, I could do a better job. You may lack your focus. You may get overwhelmed. Again, you see everything is a pain in the system because there is no alignment between the shared values and the individual behavior in the system. And I wanted to take some questions as well. So I'm going to go to the last, individual behavior in the system and processes. So if there is a very good alignment between the individual behavior and the system and processes, what you're going to do is you're going to create an environment where we talk a lot in a lot of workshops, which is collaborative and celebrating. This is what going to happen if you align the individual behavior and the system. So let me take a pause and now I go back to the integrated polarities in one slide and show you what we spoke so far. Yes. So this is what we took as an example and we nailed down into two polarities to be able to address the complexity of the system. So we talked about, I think, 6 combinations: personal meaning and individual behavior. We talked about personal meaning and shared values. We also talked about personal meaning and the system and processes. We talked about individual behavior and system and processes. There are 6 combination possibles in this quadrant. You see, if there is a good alignment between the personal meaning and individual behavior, personally you are aligned in the work, maybe the workplace. I don't want to talk about the personal integral models. Let's a little bit focus on the workplace. If there is a very good alignment between the culture and the system, that's when the structure alignment is going to come. For example, you talk about agile culture. It's collaborative and feedback driven, frequent releases, maybe value driven and all that stuff. What is that? What is the system you probably require for that alignment is flat hierarchies, open communication, no command and control and all that. So if there is a good culture and the system getting aligned, you get a structure alignment in a company, right? Let's talk about the vertical part. If there is a good alignment between the personal meaning and the shared values, you get a value alignment. How do you create a value alignment in an organization? I don't think any other better way of doing except good hirings. You probably will have to see, maybe Arun is a good person, but value fitment or a value alignment with respect to this place is not going to be aligned. So he or she may come and suffer if there is no value alignment. Let's talk about the diagonal parts: personal meaning and system and processes. You may have a very good personal meaning, but if your system is not supporting that personal connection with you, you're going to be one of the disengaged employees in a company. So let's put all together in one integral framework and think through. As a leader, you have to or you got to balance these polarities or multipolarities. If you're not able to balance these, we have seen some repercussions. I will share the slides as well. You're going to see some consequences in the system, and you may get a disjointed system. Always there is a problem either in the structural part, or maybe on a personal part, or could be on the value part or on the mission part. So the mission part, most of the leaders, I would say the last decade's leaders focuses more on the mission alignment, but to some extent they may focus on the personal alignment. But what we have seen in the next generation leaders that are successful, at least in my view, is if the leaders are shifting their polarities more from the mission alignment and the personal alignment, if they're able to leverage, you saw the small processes like seeing the system, assessing the system, and probably learning from the system, then leveraging some of these polarities might help the leaders to move towards enhanced mission assurance. You see the right hand side bottom, and also the enhanced group cohesion, because these are the two polarities that is difficult for a leader to be aligned as per the research from Polarities of Democracy you see on the slide. And this is getting very much aligned with the Wilbur model, which we talked about before we introduce. When a leader is going to focus only on the I part, he or she is going to miss the bigger picture on the collective stuff in the organization. When the leader is going to focus more on the collective system in the organization, probably he or she might miss the personal connection with people that is going to create disengaged workforce in the company. So in a nutshell, what I wanted to convey in this 45 minutes is to be able to rely oneself as a good leader with respect to the internal orientation as well as an external orientation. The six polarities that we talked, including the six alignments, will have to be leveraged by a leader. So we call such leaders as maybe leadership as a balance, next generation leaders. So if you want to understand how to measure this, let me give an example for that. Yeah. So there is something called Polarity Results for Integral Theory, Polarity Assessments. You could find, this is not a free assessments, but if you go to this website, you will see all the six dimensions of polarities are measured with respect to leadership effectiveness. And that might probably show you some red alarms on where the leader is currently lacking with respect to the balance. So many people said leadership is language, leadership is virtue. I would probably say leadership is all about balance, because that balance is going to be super difficult in the coming world. And if you want to understand more about this, I would strongly request you to refer this website where you may get more insights. Aruna, I'm not sure how are we doing with the time, but I wanted to cover one stuff. If you want to understand more detail about the practical applications on how do you leverage this quadrant, how can you be an effective leader, maybe consider joining the Cal-O workshop. You might probably get into 3 days of deep dive on how to be an effective leader if you're interested in gaining effectiveness in your leadership. That's all from my end. I wanted to take a little bit of a question if you have some time around.
Yeah, we have enough time, Venkat. We have about 20 minutes. As of now, there is one question from Karthikeyan Venkatakrishnan on what is the website that you're referring to? You're on mute, Venkat.
Okay, so I will try to put the website name on the chat because
Zoom chat. Okay.
Yeah, group chat. That's better.
If you have any other questions, please post it in Q&A window.
Yeah, I wanted to take some time because I know I felt this is a topic which is going to be little difficult to digest in an hour. I cannot put it to the audience, Arun, so I just sent it to
I
panelists.
can post it, Venkat. I can post that. I can do that. Yeah. And meanwhile, I have a question. If people, so we heard something called situational leadership. How different is it from this polarity thinking or integrating polarities in leadership?
I would say it's pretty much similar. You talk about situational leadership with delegation. It's more on the people behavior, right? You say when to delegate and when to collaborate and when to lead, when to give instructions. It's just that one of the polarities that we discussed. It's just going to be leadership interventions in individuals and collective, but they are not going to talk about the system and process in situational leadership. Probably they may talk, but it's all implicit. But here you talk things very explicitly so that you know where to take some actions when there are no synergies that you see in the system. That's why if you see one of the biggest reasons for agile transformation failure, because there is no balance in all the 6 alignments.
Okay, got it. So one more curious question: is there a perfect leadership style or perfect balance that you think that one should have as a leader?
No, I don't think so. There is a perfect balance, but what I can tell you is you cannot control the dimensions we talked on the top: personal alignment and individual behavior. To some extent, it is intrinsic. We talked about internal, right? The personal alignment.
Yeah.
So the only thing the leaders will have to be mindful is taking the right people for that particular context, so that they don't have to focus more on that quadrant as well. Else they're going to spend more time on creating personal alignments. The problem is sometimes you cannot create personal alignments too much in the org context. So probably the value alignment and the structural alignment with the system alignment is good enough for a leader to focus on.
Okay, that's good to know. And I have a question from Fadley. He asks, can you please elaborate more about enhanced capacity for collective action for values alignment? Does it mean achieving optimum capacity?
Okay, it's a good question. So let me try to explain that. Let me give it a shot. No, it's not that capacity. Let me try to put this in a different way. So if you see here, the question that you're asking is, if there is a good value alignment between the personal meaning that individual has and the shared values, which means there is a synergy. When you say enhanced capacity, what they mean is a synergy. A group of people or just a bunch of people are not teams, right? A group of individuals could also be, we may be calling as team. So one of the things that we are trying to say is enhanced capacity is you can create synergy among the team members. For example, a fundamental aspect of Scrum, cross-functional team. It doesn't mean that somebody cannot get into the uncomfortable zone of others. If there is a good alignment between the individual personal meaning and collective values, then you are going to get a very good synergy from the group as a team. It is one of the good ways to build high performing teams. That's not a capacity sort of the literal meaning of capacity. I would probably say you'll get more productivity in terms of the cohesiveness of a group.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. I hope that answered your question, Fadley. Fadley asks a follow-up question. He says the topic is quite heavy. I think we need more time and more info to digest it. Any recommended readings or book about it so we can learn more about it?
There is no such book. As I told you, I have given you a couple of links. Those links are good enough for you to refer. There is something called Polarity.org. Let me Institute for Polarity.org. I know it's quite heavy and it's a fresh topic. That is one of the reasons we thought of taking it in a webinar. So I just put that also. So these are the two sources where you will get enough information, including the research papers.
Okay. One more question. in terms of how to put this in practice? Is it a good start to use working agreements for teams?
Yeah, you can apply this framework at any level. If you want to see at a team level, you need to see individual personal values and group values, individual meaning and the group meanings. There are many ways to do that, but this webinar heavily focused on leadership effectiveness. So I would probably say whether the leader is having a good connection with the team. So if you're having a good working agreement with your teams, are you giving enough boundaries for the team? But if you're trying to improve that as an effectiveness in your teams, I would probably say do two value exercises. One is team values exercise, where try to showcase what are the personal values of an individual and team values. Try to see how many polarities are existing or more of contradictions. So you will know how the teams are going to perform. And the other one, if you want to do the work related with respect to the group working agreements, that may align the team towards a common mission or a vision, that is the team working agreement sort of exercise. But I would focus more on team values exercise over team working agreements, because working agreements is very common.
Thanks for that, Venkat. Hope that answered your question, Karthik. Um, I don't see any questions. People, if you have any questions, no question is wrong. You can ask any questions. Meanwhile, I have a question, Venkat. We generally talk about this adult stages of learning, from being unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent. Is there any relation? Is there any coherence in these concepts?
No, so there is no coherence, but what I would say is, if you go and tell a leader, there are a lot of leadership models, right? One of the reasons we picked this leadership topic is because we wanted to present some valuable stuff from a leadership studio. When you talk about the leadership is definitely a conscious effort for few years. They have to definitely put some conscious efforts to balance the system, because what happens is, we are not individuals, we don't have any individual goals, we got to leverage team goals and organizational goals. So we need to be very mindful about what we have been doing. Sometimes we may lose and go out of balance. So going on to the unconscious competence for a leader is very difficult. But this model will help the leaders to do some self-reflection. And when they do an assessment and answer a set of questionnaire, at least they know where they are lacking. Instead of, if you go and do a 360-degree survey, you will get nothing in terms of polarities, because your teams cannot take a look at the largest system. But as a leader, you can take a look at the largest system and should be able to tell what is the quadrant that you are spending least amount of time today, and how can you start spending some time on that.
Yeah, that's very good thought. Yeah. Instead of shooting in the dark, you have some reference to go and refer.
Yeah, especially if you want to, let's say you are a senior vice president, that's fine. You are a VP, then you get into head of VP division, and all that stuff is fine. But when you go to a C-level executives level, things are going to be overwhelming for you.
Yeah.
Because you got to manage set of leaders, and then you got to manage some people under them, which means the responsibility is going to be more. And that's when these type of models are going to be useful. And for agile coaches and scrum masters, if you know this kind of a model that is existing, you can leverage at different levels depending on your context. You can leverage at a team level, you can leverage at a middle level management level. You can also take these conversations to the next level if you are exposed to leadership coaching.
That's good. Yeah. Maybe one more question, because there are no questions, which is it's very new topic to me as well. I have one more question, that if that would help audience as well. We talk about leadership circle, which gives a 360-degree view of a leader. Is there any relation between the leadership circle model or the leadership circle thing?
I don't know if I talk about leadership model. I mean, I don't want to confuse people. Basically, I know it's a pretty advanced topic, but I don't want to. The main intention for me is to present something fresh so that people can go and have a good read offline. There are a lot of content available on the website that I gave you. I think you will read for the next 1 year because so many resources are available with respect to the leadership coaching. So many times I get a question in workshop. This leader is command and control. This leader is this. This leader is that. How can I go and coach? Because there is no alignment with the leader. You're talking about a lot on alignment. Now we are bringing a model to bridge that alignment gap, right? So that is one of the thought process around that. If I talk about the leadership 360-degree and this, I would probably say the leadership 360-degree is more of a behavior, and this is more of a framework. So you can relate this framework as a macro model. Inside that, you can relate this leadership 360-degree as a micro model.
That's good. Thank you. I see no more questions. Then it's good to close for us.
Yeah. So I know this is a pretty advanced topic. I would encourage you to read a couple of stuff that I've given you because this is an emerging content. What we have presented on this webinar is just one of the research works by Clacks. If you go to the websites, you will see a lot of research is going on with respect to the polarity thinkings. And probably this is going to be the next generation leadership development plans or models that we will see in the future.
Yep. Thank you, Venkat. Thanks for your time. Thanks for presenting this. And people who have missed this topic in the regional Scrum gathering because Venkat was sick, this is a good opportunity for you guys. And thanks everyone who has joined on a Thursday evening to listen to our webinar. Upcoming webinars. So myself, I'm going to present next week on outcomes over output, the ways to create human-centered goals. There are a few more webinars lined up in November. Stay tuned, guys. You can visit tryscrum.com/webcast to see the schedule of webinars. Thank you, Venkat. Thanks everyone.
Bye.